Daily Detroit is brought to you by the community. Support our work at patreon.com/dailydetroit.
Hello, friends, and welcome to your Daily Detroit. It is Friday, July 8th, 2022. Coming to you from east of Woodward, I'm Jer Stays.
And from west of Woodward, I'm Devin O'Reilly. Another warm Friday right in the heart of summer. Hope everybody had a great 4th of July weekend.
Yeah, and it seems like a lot of people are still pretty strong into the vacation vibes right now, looking at the driving on the freeways. I went to the DCFC game. It was rush hour, and it was quiet. It was glorious to drive, but also it reminded me we are still in big vacation vibe time.
Oh, for sure. This is the thick of travel season, vacation season. I think, most people, it's all about extending that vacation. I think a lot of people basically started with the 4th of July weekend and just extended that through the full week because why not? Mine as well. So I think, from a work perspective, I think a lot of people are not really attending to their emails and phone calls as much this week as they extend. And we've had great weather, so you might as well.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Speaking of which, where have you been, Devin?
I finally got out to, we talked about this before, the Bodega in Brush Park.
Is there a bodega cat?
No, I did not see a bodega cat. But, I did see a cat wandering around the Brush Park area. So maybe the bodega is his home base. But it's a really cool spot. We mentioned it before, but it's great for that neighborhood. I mean, that neighborhood, unless you have really kind of been on the ground floor, like walking down there or like driving around there recently in Brush Park, not just on Woodward, you really don't grasp the level of development. I remember there was a lot of people who were skeptical of the ability for the City Modern project to really kind of fill out and get all the people there and get the critical mass. Not only that, I mean, they're on phase 2 and 3 of this project at this point. They're continuing to build residential in that area, and it's just teeming with life. I stopped by there on like a happy hour time, and it was just teeming with all sorts of young people and older people and couples and babies and kids, and it was just it's very really building itself into a neighborhood in this bodega space that has a full market, all the kind of needs and goods that you could want in a pinch, but also full bar and a cafe with sandwiches. I tried the old-fashioned, the Oaxaca old-fashioned, which was fantastic. They did a great Manhattan, but you can get any number of cocktails, beer, and wine there. So seems like a great addition to the neighborhood, but also for people who don't live in the neighborhood, it might be in the area of Brush Park. Well,
that Brush Park neighborhood has been kind of a talk of the town a little bit, with Nicole Curtis mentioning the developments happening around the Ransom Gillis house, which we mentioned, units for sale in there. But, if you haven't been there, it's the area where Anthony Bourdain and Charlie LaDuff did their whole Detroit episode on Bourdain's TV show, and it's where they were standing.
Mm-hmm.
All of that's now developments. It is completely different than what you saw in that show. And the other thing I'd mention is that these developments, they are pretty much high end. I mean, there are some affordable options in there, like set aside as affordable. I think there's also one senior housing building, but the rest, I mean, the listings are up there, and it's almost like Detroit's Millionaires Row.
In essence, yes, Jared, because a lot of those row houses, carriage houses are going for $1 million plus. And, on that Nicole Curtis thing, I did see some people mention this. They did actually preserve all of the large historic mansions that they could. I think that's important to point out. At that point, by the time Brush Park was at, the 2017-18 level, a lot of those homes were just either demolished or absolutely in rubble. So it was pretty sparse. But if you walk through there, they did preserve a good amount of the mansions and the old homes that were there and turn them into either flats, multi-unit housing, or in some cases, single-unit housing. And those are going for $1.5 million, $2 million. So they did preserve as much of the old houses as they could. And then obviously kind of clashed that with the ultra-modern look of some of the carriage houses that they now have.
Well, I'll say clashed. I mean, and this isn't... How do I say this? This isn't necessarily an indication against Bedrock, but I don't like the 5/1s. Like a lot of them I don't think are executed as well as they could be. And having traveled, I think some of the 5/1s, and what I mean by that is in construction, we did an episode with Aaron Madry, who does the dig. The idea of a 5/1 is the first floor is cement, then the next 2 to 5 floors, depending on the height of the building, are regular construction. And it's an effective way, an inexpensive way to put up a lot of housing. And what I realized traveling is that I don't like a lot of the 5/1s and the lack of details. Some people really love them. Some people love the modern clash. I think it comes down to taste. It's not my favorite. I'll be the first to admit that. But it's also not my money.
Very true, Jerry. I mean, we know construction costs are very high, and so I do understand why you'd want to keep those as low as possible. But at the same time, like we said, these things are going for $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 and up. So you're getting a lot of money in for building these essentially luxury developments.
Well, and the location is so close to everything downtown, right? Like, I think that's part of the reason why they're getting the dollars they are, is that density does matter, especially for those kinds of home buyers.
Brush Park literally sits in kind of the epicenter of all you could want in the kind of greater downtown Detroit area because, right, like you said, you have downtown and everything around it to your south. You have the arenas just to your west and south. You have Midtown Detroit and all of its restaurants and culinary scene just to your north. You've got Eastern Market literally just to your east. You can walk there. You can bike there. From a physical standpoint, you got the freeways right there. From a physical standpoint, Brush Park probably has to be the most desirable geographically alone.
Well, I didn't visit a building and I didn't visit an establishment, Devin.
Okay, but you visited something or something visited you?
Well, if it visited me, then I think that'd be a whole new other podcast, right? We get like all those true crime vibes.
Right.
Or ghost hunters. Now, I was driving around doing errands and I found a 3,100-pound dog.
Wow. That sounds like something out of Clifford.
Well, it pretty much is. So this is new to me. It may not be new to other people, and that's totally fair. But I was wandering around on your side of town, on the west side, and I found a giant 3,100-pound art sculpture dog named Rusty. And it was in a very unassuming place. It's in the Allen Park DPW yard. There's no sign. I mean, he's set up nicely, but it's this giant dog. It's like 2 or 3 times as tall as a person. It's a super cool art project that was part of Art Prize. Apparently for years, it was in the old Baker College campus there in Allen Park.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And it won an art prize in 2011, and the artist is Rich Brandstrom. And if you ever get a chance to check it out, it's in Allen Park. As I said, go look for the DPW yard. It is behind a fence, so if the fence is locked, you're not going to be able to, get in there. I saw that there were plans, apparently, to make a dog park, do some things. Those things apparently never happened as the pandemic hit. But what a cool piece of sculpture. And I really wish it was somewhere like in downtown Allen Park or somewhere a little bit less off the beaten path, because how cool would it be to have a dog park with a giant dog? And then if you look in the belly, there's actually an entire workshop inside, like little diorama, like great little details. So check it out if you're on that side of town.
That is my side of town. That's just, I think it's on Outer Drive, right, Jerry?
I want to say so. Yeah, something like that. That sounds about right.
Yeah, I think if you take Outer Drive basically towards the southwest, towards the water, I think you might pass it. It's really cool. And that's, some of the fun stuff you get with urban or suburban exploration in this case.
Oh yeah, I'm always a sucker to stop by art.
I also went somewhere new, and it wasn't really that hard to find, Jerry, because it's actually right on the Michigan Avenue, West Dearborn strip there in the Wagner Place build out that, we call it the Ford build out in West Dearborn there. It's becoming more difficult to find good ice cream places, I think, recently, because we lost a lot of like Cold Stone and places like that. Baskin Robbins seems to be kind of losing some steam here. But I don't know. Have you been to one of these like nitrogen creameries, Jerry?
You know what? My roommate makes nitrogen ice cream at science fiction conventions.
Wow. So have you seen this being made?
Oh, it's so cool. So he takes the giant thing and pours it into a bowl and then adds the different flavorings. I mean, I'm sure he doesn't do it the official fancy way.
It is so cool. And I can only imagine for kids, this would be amazing to watch get done. It's amazing for adults to get done. So the place is called Milkster.
Okay.
And it's nitrogen creamery. Basically, they use liquid nitrogen to pour into the ice cream bowls. So it basically creates the ice cream. So you're watching literally ice cream get made. They pour your toppings in, you pick what you pick what you want it to be. So they pour the Oreo crumbles in and the chocolate in, and then they pour just liquid cream into this mixing bowl, this metal mixing bowl. And then it just, like a cauldron, just smoke and smoke and smoke and smoke as it mixes, and out comes the most creamy ice cream you've ever had in your life. I mean, it definitely has a distinct texture that's very rich and creamy. So it was really awesome. It's a small place, so you can kind of miss it. And I think I had previously, but it's right there, like I said, right there on Michigan Avenue in West Dearborn. And it's a really cool place, especially with the weather being the way it is, to cool off with some nitrogen ice cream.
One thing that we did after a party, and I'm not saying this was the safest thing to do, but took the remaining little bits of the nitrogen and poured it over a full kiddie pool and turned the entire backyard into like nitrogen, like that whole like stage smoke thing.
Wow. I don't want to encourage anybody, but that does sound pretty cool.
Let's get into a couple of stories to talk about. This one still in the food and drink area, but man, a bummer. Got news on Thursday that Cass Cafe, opened since 1993, almost 30 years of service, is closing on July 17th. If you're not familiar, Cass Cafe is, well, on Cass, about a block north of the dog park. Been around for a long time. Lots of art. Has kind of 2 stories, well, 1.5 stories, with a cool sitting areas. It's just been an establishment for so long. I used to go there all the time when I lived in the art center neighborhood by the DIA. Man, there's been some change in Midtown.
Yeah, this is huge, Jared. I mean, especially for those of us, our age and even a bit older who, experienced Detroit in the early 2000s. This was just an icon of Midtown. And again, I can't say enough about their food, first of all, Jared. And I will say this, as places open up and the food seemed to come so varied and so robust, I didn't go there as much as I used to. But man, when I was going there for probably a 7 or 8 year period between like 2012 and 2020, their food was just, it rivaled some of the best fine dining restaurants in the city. They did not skimp on ingredients and in quality of food. And my parents introduced me to that place because they used to go to the Hillberry Theater for shows, and they would go to Cass Cafe either before or after the show. So I really got introduced kind of as a teenager to Cass Cafe. They took me there, and then I started going there on my own. The food was amazing. And I wonder if, with rising costs, if it just became really expensive, A, to have space in Midtown, and B, to have that level of quality with your food when things are so expensive. And, Midtown is a changing market.
It is a college market. I also don't want to overplay the idea that they were in business a really long time. And there are a number of businesses that are kind of turning over because of that age. I'm going to put a pin in the Hillberry thing. I think that's interesting because I, too, used to go to the Hillberry with my grandmother and go to dinner at the Cass Cafe. My grandmother loved the Hillberry Theater. That was one of her favorite things to do.
It was a nice little date night. So you probably ran into the O'Reillys on one of your trips there. I almost guarantee you ran into my parents.
Well, make sure you get in there. As I said, July 17th, there is time to say your goodbyes, a very special space. And I really hope that something else goes into that space and takes advantage of it. All right, a little bit of statewide news that impacts Metro Detroit. Statewide, according to U.S. Census estimates, it looks like the state of Michigan has lost about 27,000 people in the last year. We are getting closer and closer to that 10 million mark. Now, Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb County all saw losses in this estimate, with the biggest hit being Wayne at 1%. The reasons include COVID deaths. You've got a declining birth rate here. You also have an aging population and, of course, some people leaving. The data showed that big losers were Detroit, which lost 7,000 people, down to 632,000. Now, the mayor of Detroit, of course, contests this. He believes that there was a massive undercount, but that's basically like the entire city of Huntington Woods leaving Detroit in the last year. People are also leaving Dearborn, according to this. Ann Arbor and Warren all lost more than 1,000 people. Ann Arbor and Grand Rapids lost people as well, which was kind of stunning. Auburn Hills was the biggest gainer in the state, gaining 400 people. But I feel like we're kind of at a crossroads here, Devin, and we need, look, it's not the end of the world to lose a little bit, but, we need to get that pendulum moving. And I think we need to make some changes and do some things, not just like government, but I think all of us kind of have a role to play.
Yeah, we can't rely on government for this. These are things that we need to kind of be the change, and whether that's being advocates for our state and being people and being net positives to the state and helping people see why it's a great place to live and move. People are moving around in some cases within Michigan, but like you said, they're also leaving, and there's multiple reasons. We can't just say 26,000 people left because they didn't want to be here anymore. Like you said, there's unfortunately things like COVID and an aging population that contribute some to this. And, even the cities, I mean, look at you, Grand Rapids and Ann Arbor are two kind of beacons of urban, suburban cities where you would think people are really desiring to live. And even if they're losing people. And Dearborn, which actually, when we looked at that 2020 census, Dearborn was one of the lone bright spots. They gained 10,000 people in the recent census and went over 100,000. So even if they're losing, a decent amount of people, that tells you something. And we should take this seriously, and we should work together to try and do something about this, I think, Jared, but it's going to be difficult.
It is. And I think it's important to think about things in a way that doing things the way they were and expecting different results is kind of the definition of insanity. So if that we can do something, whether it's with our businesses, with it supporting each other, right? Like supporting the things that help keep people here, that help connect community, looking at your local downtown, wherever it may be. Sure, there's downtown Detroit, and we could do a whole episode on ideas for downtown Detroit, but there are so many other communities around that you could do things. You look at a place like Warren, it is a big community. And we had Dave Gifford on from Transit Guide Detroit. There are so many little nooks and crannies that you could do something more with. But I think we need to just have a more affirmative vision and say, hey, we're going to build it different. We're going to do it different. And we're going to demand what we want as a generation and not just take what we've always been given,
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jared. That's where it gets a little... if you're moving within Michigan, I guess that's still a good thing as long as we're keeping that commerce, we're keeping that population in Michigan. I suppose that's fine. Some cities will have to lose population. Some cities will obviously have to gain it. But as long as they're not leaving Michigan, that needs to be the ultimate kind of guidepost and guiding light is, stopping people from leaving Michigan and getting more people here, however we can do that.
I will mention that those made up of 2 or more races, Asian Americans, African Americans, those are groups that are actually growing. In fact, most groups are growing just a tiny bit. The majority, in fact, the vast majority of the decline is in the white population.
And that's not surprising. But at the same time, again, there's only so many levers we can pull. And another one that we have to mention is immigration. We have to be progressive and open to immigration policies. We have to be a state that gains from immigrants because we've discussed all of the benefits that brings for a multitude of reasons. If we become a more diverse state because of that, I certainly don't think that's a bad thing.
Right now in the election cycle, it's definitely a point of contention, but it's very clear to me the kinds of impacts that immigrants can bring to a community. And I think it's a net positive. This is an area where we need more people, So I say within well-reasoned, let's just bring them in, right? Let's do it.
Absolutely.
All right. Before we let you go, I want to talk about a set of earmarks that the state legislature has put into effect. A lot of them are going to affect the region, and a good number of them are going to affect major projects in the city of Detroit. This is pretty much $1 billion of specific funding through the state budget. The big 2 things, one, the Detroit Center for Innovation, that project with Stephen Ross that's going to be with the Illiches and the University of Michigan, is getting $100 million shot in the arm. This is not an incentive. This is cash. This is different than some of the other things we've talked about where it's complicated and all whatever. This is money. And this makes up a huge chunk of that $250 million that was originally proposed that was going to be to do this U of M project. The other $100 million is coming from Stephen Ross. That means we're pretty much there on funding. I mean, $50 million, still 50. I feel like they're going to find it. I feel like this one may actually happen, especially the U of M parts.
I think this is going to happen. It may be, a little more delayed than people were expecting, but it's going to happen because you've got this $100 million that's going towards it. So that's certainly an incentive to get this done. Now, I know people are a little skeptical of Olympia development, partially for good reason in terms of bringing projects to fruition. However, the fact that you have Stephen Ross's related companies, which obviously is a well-known commodity in real estate development and projects nationally and globally, and you have the fact that U of M is involved in this. I mean, their track record is certainly good. I think we're going to see this come to the finish line. So it'll be positive. It'll bring jobs. It'll bring really cool, we've talked about this before, theaters and shops and restaurants and public spaces. And I think public spaces are important, community and public spaces. But I think those are planning on being a part of this. So I think it'll be great to have this developed where surface parking lots once stood, which are the bane of our existence, both of us. I know you and me, Jared.
I wish it wasn't done this way, but I understand why it was done this way, if that makes sense.
It has to get done somehow, Jer, and to me, the ends justify the means.
There's also $100 million going to the Carmanos Cancer Institute for a treatment facility operated by Wayne State. The Joe Louis Greenway is getting $40 million for that project. It's more than 27 miles. That's going to be a huge deal. I've seen some of the work going through Hamtramck. In fact, some concrete just got poured over by Joy Road recently. That's going to be a transformational project, and that $40 million will be a real shot in the arm. Eastern Market's getting $12 million for food storage infrastructure. They support so many different businesses over there that I could spend an episode just reading a list. And then there will be $10 million for the Historical Museum and the Charles Wright Museum, which is an area we were concerned about.
Yeah, we talked about that before. A little bit harrowing, but I'm really, really glad to see. I mean, this is money absolutely well spent to keep these 2 cultural gems, and I'll even say 3 cultural gems, and I'll include Eastern Market in this, viable and around for future generations, because they're things that we can't lose. I mean, the Charles H. Wright Museum, the Detroit Historical Museum, and then Eastern Market, with all they do to promote culture and learning and bring together people to understand our history and where we're going, is too important to lose. And so the funding for that, definitely well spent, even though that looks like the final items here, they're dropping the bucket compared to the $100 million for Cancer Institute and for Center for Innovation, but they are definitely money well spent, I think.
And of course, if you've got feedback on all of these stories, if you've got ideas on ways to keep people here, things that we could do together to make that happen, dailydetroit@gmail.com. Devin O'Reilly, it's always good to talk with you.
Likewise, Jer. I hope everyone's doing well. I hope the studio's doing well over there, Jer. You and I have been virtual the past few weeks since the fire, but hope everything's going well with you over there.
Yeah, I mean, we're making it work. I'm literally in a storage area right now with a dog bed as my sound panel. I also want to thank Ruth, Gary, Max, a number of anonymous people who have asked to be anonymous people who are supported our fire fund at buymeacoffee.com/dailydetroit. We are looking at some things to do to take things really to the next level. And of course, if you've got feedback with that, again, that's the email address, dailydetroit@gmail.com. Try to serve the community in different ways and help rebuild. I am staring at a Daily Detroit shield that has been slowly cleaned off over the last weekend, will soon be repainted, one of many steps.
Absolutely. We'll come back stronger, Jaron. I'm happy to hear and see the progress that's already taking place and excited for what's to come.
Also, you're podcasting again. You're cheating on us again, Devin.
Well, the day job also requires some podcasting. Well, it requires it. I wanted to do it, but the Detroiters Think Big podcast. We did some recordings up at Mackinac last month that were really cool. We talked to some amazing companies and entrepreneurs locally, Detroit-based, and here in Michigan. Everything from the future of battery technology to basically personal branding and everything in between. So check them out. Detroiters Think Big is the podcast. It's by the Detroit Regional Chamber. I am the host, but we've got some really cool guests, and there'll be more to come on that. More episodes to come later this summer.
All right, well, thanks to those behind the scenes, Cheyenne Oserini, engineer Randy Walker, Fletcher Sharp, and of course to our members, patreon.com/dailydetroit. We've got some new tumblers coming and some deliveries, so I'm excited about that. With that, I'm Jer Stays.
I'm Devin O'Reilly.
Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.